I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
Okay, we're going to get to insane stories of Wall Street in a second. But as long as we got Omid and Dan here. And Omid, can you describe what you did on crypto for Citigroup? You just recently left that position. Are you allowed to describe your top secret work for them?
Yeah, sure. I was a contractor for Citi Ventures, which is the corporate VC arm of Citi. But other than venture investing, Citi Ventures is also involved with all the different innovation efforts throughout the bank. So I was sort of a at-large crypto expert that I worked with whatever part of the bank, and sometimes clients had an interest on the topic.
So this might be dated by the time this episode comes out, but at this moment, the crypto markets are in chaos, and Coinbase, because of bullshit headlines, everybody thinks or suspects might go or has a chance of going bankrupt. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a mandatory disclosure that was just put into effect by the SEC that all companies that have traded in crypto assets have to just say that, hey, crypto assets, like any other assets, bankruptcy laws apply to them. So it's nothing other than that, but the headlines don't mention that. They just say, oh, Coinbase mentions the word bankruptcy in their SEC filing.
Yes. And a lot of this is, I'm sympathetic. A lot of these crypto companies operate in this vacuum where they have to comply with things like requirements of disclosures, but because there are literally no laws and there's no precedence of how they operate, they just say, like, here are the things that can go wrong. And specifically with this issue, it wasn't that Coinbase can go bankrupt. What freaked people out is that if Coinbase goes bankrupt, they had to say something like, well, you might lose your coins, or Coinbase might lose client coins.
Which is also ridiculous. It's as if they're saying Coinbase is like Lehman Brothers in 2008, when in fact, Coinbase is more like Fidelity in any year of Fidelity's existence. They just simply take customers' money and they buy what assets the customers want, and they take fees, and that's how they make revenues. They're not like closeted hedge funds like Lehman Brothers was.
James, just real quick, let's hope this isn't your Kramer Bear Stearns moment.
Yeah, well, so Kramer famously said that your money is safe if you keep it in Bear Stearns, which it wasn't really. And that was the problem. But here's the thing, like, okay, on the one hand, all the headlines are not telling the truth about what this disclosure is really all about. But the real question I have is, could perception equal reality? Like, could there be a run on Coinbase because so many people are scared about the headlines, and that causes the problem?
Seems unlikely because unlike Bear Stearns, as far as we know, Coinbase is not a levered institution.
No, but other than that, I mean, so that's what I mean. They don't speculate in anything. They're not like Lehman Brothers. They're more like Fidelity. So even if there's a run, they just liquidate everybody's accounts and return the money, and that's that.
Right. And the specific, this comes, I spoke to friends of mine who spoke directly to Coinbase Legal. The reason why they gave this disclosure is that the way they see it, as far as they're concerned, their client assets are held in a bankruptcy remote fashion. That even if Coinbase does go under, clients will just be able to go be like, well, they had 5 of my Bitcoins, and then you get it back. And they're confident that for people who use Coinbase's separate custody service and cold storage, that would hold up. For people who use Coinbase Exchange, so say if you're a retail user and you send a Bitcoin to Coinbase because you want to sell it, those coins are held in a omnibus, commingled, pooled account. And again, as far as Coinbase is concerned, they're still your coins, even though they're mixed with everybody else's coins. Their concern is, again, because there are no laws or no precedents, if a company like Coinbase goes into bankruptcy, maybe a judge would feel differently, right? Maybe if Coinbase has creditors, they put a claim on the coins and they say those are in bankruptcy remote. I get
okay, but which is part two, which is that Coinbase has $6 billion in cash, has been largely profitable until now. This quarter's loss was $490 million, but there's a lot. You have to unpack that number quite a bit to research it. It would be a long time before Coinbase was actually in any trouble. So that aside, right now in the crypto markets, we're getting a lot of liquidations because of margin calls and fear and uncertainties about pegged stable coins and so on. Why should crypto exist? Why doesn't it go to zero and some other things? Eventually the world's going to move to a digital asset economy, but it doesn't have to be now, and it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. I'm being the devil's advocate. Why should you be a believer that that's not what's happening here?
Well, I wouldn't actually agree with that statement if we say all crypto. Like, there's plenty of crypto that I would argue should not exist.
Oh, yeah. Let's say 95% of crypto. When I say crypto in this case, I just mean Bitcoin.
Yeah. So why I think Bitcoin should exist because it is algorithmically minted and apolitical money that in the world that we live in now serves a useful purpose. It's sort of like the Switzerland of money, that in a time of growing global conflict and polarization and things like what happened with Russia, Ukraine, the fact that individuals, corporations, and governments have a way where they can transact value where another government cannot prevent them is useful.
Right. I agree. And the idea that there's this, just like you don't do business with people you don't trust, you don't use currency you don't trust. Like, if I wanted to buy your book and I said, look, Omid, I'll buy your book, but I need to pay you in rubles, you'd probably say no way because you don't trust rubles and the dollar and people trust the dollar. But with the dollar, there's still like a handful of people who are deciding monetary policy, deciding the value of the dollar in your pocket, and you can't fully trust it. Not to mention all the intermediaries for a transaction, all the transaction fees, the potential for fraud and forgery and so on. So all that aside, though, the dollar is more trustworthy than any other currency. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate because I'm bullish, but why can we believe that Bitcoin will not go to zero and they'll just figure this whole crypto thing out later?
Two things. One, what I said earlier, that it does actually serve an important utility. And that's not the Today, yeah. And that's not the utility of a speculator who wants to trade something or bet on something to go up. There are a lot of things you can use for that. But one thing that's actually very unique about Bitcoin as far as money is concerned is that other than cash, Bitcoin is the first money in history that comes with its own payment system. It's certainly the first digital money in history that comes with its own payment system. The dollar doesn't have that. If I want to send you dollars, if we were in the same room, I could give you cash. Otherwise, we have to go through a myriad, one of multiple different payment systems that are controlled by a corporation or a government. And at best, that means that we pay fees that we'd rather not pay, and there are probably delays that we'd rather.
But there's upside too, though. Like, I trust Visa, I trust PayPal, I trust the U.S. government on the whole. Now, I admit I'm paying fees and there's privacy issues, but for the average citizen, who cares? Like, and the fees are baked into the prices of everything anyway.
So that last point is interesting. I actually feel like a lot of merchants would disagree with you that it's okay. I mean, they trust Visa and whoever too, but if they got 5% gross margins and paying 2% on a credit card swipe, they would rather find someone that they could trust that could be a lot cheaper.
But for simple transactions, there's fees on Bitcoin too.
Yes. Although with the additional infrastructure being built out, like the Lightning Network, layer 2, that will be insignificant. It'll certainly, on a long enough timeline for small transactions, I'm confident blockchain payments will be, you're paying a couple of basis points, a lot less than what traditional payment intermediaries charge. And to be clear, I'm not saying that like Bitcoin is going to replace the dollar, that people are going to start buying coffee or paying rent with Bitcoin. What I'm saying is with Bitcoin specifically, the fact that there is sort of a global universal backup plan, that in case your existing method of saving and paying doesn't work, which a lot of times the focus is like, oh, if there's censorship, like what happened to the Canadian truckers, or the U.S. confiscated Afghanistan's central bank reserves. But I would point out, because when you make that argument, people say, well, I live in America, I live in Germany, that's not something I worry about. That is a luxury of the first world. And for billions of people on this planet, they really do not have some kind of a trustworthy way to make savings and transactions in the same way that you do with Visa.
Well, look at like right now. I mean, we've sent hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin to Ukraine, which we would not have been able to do otherwise. Or look at, in terms of trust, look at Argentina a couple decades ago, just reached into everyone's bank account, took half the money and said, we'll pay you back like in 6 years. Good luck. and that doesn't, we could say right now, oh, that will never happen in the US, but those are famous last words.
Right. And I think what's great about the existence of something like a Bitcoin is that it encourages the powers that be to not go to to not turn it up to 11 when it comes to things like financial censorship, because now they'll have to say, oh, if we start doing a lot of things like that, for example, if we start saying, oh, we don't like this protest movement, so we're going to prevent it from using PayPal or have a bank account, which did come out of the Canadian trucker movement. But there's no reason why you could have a right-wing politician that says, oh, I don't think the Black Lives Matter movement should be able to receive funding.
Right. And the interesting thing about the Canadian one is he invoked a law that they had recently passed and had never been used, and he invoked it incorrectly, and no one did anything about it. Like he broke the law, and it was very overt. How Trudeau broke the law. Sorry, Dan, that we're going into this.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, because this is on everyone's mind, all this stuff. But Omid, I want to go even one level deeper, which is Ethereum and other crypto apps and DeFi and so on, because those things obviously are even getting hit more than Bitcoin, and there's a lot of investors. Let's say I have a real world use case for NFTs, and one thing I don't know if I think we've all discussed this, is a basic real world use case might be ticketing. New York Knicks sells me a ticket for $100. I sell it to a scalper for $500. The scalper sells it to someone for $1,000. The New York Knicks only makes money on the transaction to me. But if all tickets were turned into NFT, if there was an NFT ticket master, then the Knicks would make royalties on every secondary transaction. And this is a great real world use case. This is actually being developed. It's no different than some other applications like NFTs for and crypto for medical care and records and real estate deeds and so on. But we all say, oh, this is what Ethereum and NFTs and crypto are good for. But why can't just a centralized secure database do this?
Because
Do any of these things?
you wouldn't have the same trust assurances. So there's a term in crypto that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's this idea of trustlessness, which is that a trustless system is one where you don't trust anyone, but you trust the outcome. So if you have your NFT on a blockchain like Ethereum, you don't trust whoever sent it to you. You don't trust the Ethereum miners. You don't trust Vitalik Buterin. You don't trust your wallet provider, and you don't have to. It's designed in a way that you can still trust that your NFT is your NFT, and that if you go to send it to Dan, nobody can stop you. And now Dan can trust that he gets the NFT without even having to trust you.
But what if like Amazon or Google made the secure database for ticketing to provide all the functionality I just described?
Yeah.
I trust Google and Amazon. I mean, some people don't on the fringes, but in general, I use Google. I don't think they're using my data for anything nefarious. So I use Gmail. I don't think they're reading my emails every day. So what's the issue? Why do I really need NFTs and Ethereum for this?
One, not everybody would agree with you. And by the way, isn't the point of Gmail for them to read your emails? Like, why?
I think they're reading mine every day.
It's true. I do get a high degree of erectile dysfunction ads whenever I send emails to my wife. But
did you get like a tracking history, like a map history every month or something?
oh yeah, I did get. I don't know if it was some beta program or whatever, but for a while, on the first of every month, I was getting an email from Google. I don't get it anymore. I was getting an email from Google that said, "Oh, James, we thought you might like to see where you've been this month." And every day it was me. They would show my path. Was me staying in my apartment all day and then walking 300 feet to the comedy club across the street, staying a half hour there, and then walking 300 feet back. Like I was the laziest person in the world, according to Google. And that was a little weird that they knew every step I took. But I didn't mind that much. It was just unusual.
So,
but you know, that aside, I do trust Google to keep track of tickets.
But you know, Google's a great example because I use them in my book to talk about how, like, one of the core concepts in it is what I call the curse of history, which is the more you trust someone or something, the more likely they become to take advantage of it. In a moment, maybe we'll talk about someone like Bernie Madoff is the perfect example of that, right? Like a lot of people trusted him to manage their money. They wouldn't have trusted you, me, and Dan nearly as much, which would have made it a lot harder for us to pull off a Ponzi scheme. And the amazing thing about Google is if you go and read the original paper that was published by Page and Brin, where they proposed their PageRank algorithm and talk about how they can improve search, there is an entire section on how advertising is a bad business model for a search engine company. It's the first appendix, and it's something like advertising and its mixed motives for search. And they even cite an example that they say, oh, today, if you go and search Google for a cell phone, what you get is the first thing that comes up is something about people talking on their cell phones and driving being dangerous and could lead to accidents. If advertising were the business model, then what you would probably get is an ad for a cell phone, and that would diminish the quality of the search. The irony of that is that today Google is the world's biggest advertising company. And if you search for smartphone, probably the first thing that comes up is an ad for the Pixel phones that they sell. So it's a perfect example of like all these people trusted Google. And now, I think there's a reason why their motto is no longer don't be evil, because a lot of people would say, well, that's richly ironic considering they exist to monetize people's information.
Yeah, no, their motto now is do the right thing, right? Or something like that.
I don't even know, but the funny thing about, like, if you trust Google with something like your NFT, and your NFT becomes increasingly valuable, or your portfolio of NFTs, because the world you describe comes true, right? Tickets are NFTs, and
or tickets track secondary sales and provide royalties. So, and they're guaranteed to give me access to the stadium, because when you buy a ticket from a scalper, you might not be guaranteed to have access. They might not be real tickets. They could be forged.
Right.
But if you're using a secure database in the center, somehow that does all the same functionality. Why wouldn't I just use that? Why do I really need this extra layer of Ethereum and whatever?
So what happens if it's a ticket for an event for some kind of a speaker or comedian that Google doesn't approve of?
Right. Well, presumably right now. Well, okay, you're right, because YouTube has certainly banned people, right? So
Yeah.
if like, take someone that they've banned, I don't want to name any names specifically. They could ban anybody, and maybe that person is blocked off from, selling tickets and to their events, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
th-
Whereas
th- there-
whereas the NFT Ticketmaster can't do that. And it's already happening in today's world. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
What's good with the NFT is that nobody can disagree with the fact that you own it and whatever the chain of provenance is, that like you got it from a comedy club and then you turn around and send it to Dan. That is trusted list information that becomes universally available. And even if the issuer goes bankrupt, because the other problem you have is when you're like, well, what if Google manages everything in a secure database? Well, now Google's sort of a custodian of a pseudo financial asset that could grow to be billions and billions of dollars worth of money. And then if Google fails, like all of that goes away because who's managing the secure database? Nobody. So it comes down to a question of resilience that, like, yeah, as long as everything goes well, having Google issue the NFT or manage the NFT is fine. It's actually better because it would be much better UI, UX than how NFTs on Ethereum work. But you just do not have the same kinds of assurances that you would want.
Okay, I buy into all that. So 2 questions then. One is, do people understand that? Because again, we know very smart people. Like we all know Nassim Taleb. Nassim Taleb's been in our trading circles since we started trading, and he's been on this podcast. I'm a big fan of his books, but he wrote a paper today, basically saying, none of this is true. Like all of this could go to zero. So why is he such a smart guy? Why is he so wrong here? Because I believe what you're saying.
By the way, I'm a big fan of Nassim too, and
Me too. Huge fan.
I've had lengthy conversations about this with him, and he actually blurbed my book, kindly enough, as did one James Altucher.
Nassim and I.
Yes.
Two. I don't know. 2 peas in a pod.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was good to represent the pro, the believer and the anti. And I think actually Nassim makes certain good points about crypto, but part of appreciating all of this is you have to be able to take all of these different variables and factors and see them come together into one elegant solution. And Nassim has not reached that point yet. I hope someday he does. But otherwise,
why he hasn't reached that? He's a genius.
That I couldn't tell you. I think part of it is actually, in my experience, the smarter people are and the more knowledgeable they are about the way the world has worked up until now, the harder it is for them to appreciate why this different way of building trust could potentially be superior. So in my case, I guess I was kind of an idiot and then I stumbled into Bitcoin, which it was easier to learn it. But I did go through this multi-year process where I was skeptical and confused. I thought there was something unique about it and I wanted to learn more. And then eventually I realized I just had to learn to let go of my mental model of how people interact or how a financial system works. And then once I did that, I was able to sort of like see the light on how this new way of building trust, which unlike every other way, including the ways that Nassim supports, was invented for the world of today, right? Like, let's not take for granted that almost all of our existing systems, especially for anything remotely financial, was at least architected before the internet and smartphones and all of that. Like, it was built for a world where people still use mainframes and made telephone calls and stuff.
So assuming what you're saying is a truth about, Bitcoin, Ethereum, crypto in general, is there enough momentum behind this truth that it sticks around? Even though, let's say, some small percentage of the world now is using anything crypto related, is there enough momentum to keep it going, or will people fall back into the dark ages pre-crypto and try to do this with secure databases and PayPal and Venmo instead of Bitcoin? And because we're just at the beginning of adoption. Honestly, we're at the internet in 2001, where it's been around. The web had been around 10 years, but people still thought it was a fad, and no one had put in their credit card numbers into e-commerce sites yet.
Yeah, I think it's clearly volatile, because the prices are volatile. So what happens is like a bunch of people get really rich off of crypto, and then you have a period like this past month where a bunch of people lose a lot of money in crypto. But the direction of travel is in building momentum. And a good example of that are the NFTs that you mentioned for things like art and collectibles. That's a brand new asset class that never existed before.
But is that a worthwhile asset class? Like, I don't care about that stuff. And I know some people do, but
Yeah.
even that market's starting to slow down.
Yeah, and there too, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe not even 95, maybe 99% of all these NFTs end up worthless. But it was interesting to me how I've met a lot of people in the past year who had no interest in Bitcoin or blockchain or DeFi or stable coins, but there was something about the idea of digital collectibles that resonated with them. So they went through the trouble of setting up a wallet and going to one of these platforms like OpenSea and buying an image or a video or a song or something.
By the way, the other thing you mentioned about the adoptance of crypto is the UI. So clearly, the UI of a bank is better than the UI of Sushi Swap or some DeFi exchange.
Depends
And-
on the bank, but let's go
Yeah.
with this. Yeah.
But I do think that gets solved. It reminds me of Unix. So Unix is a very academic, almost obscure outside of academia and techies operating system. And so Linux was created to make it a little more usable, but even that wasn't usable. But then suddenly you had companies like Red Hat and VA Linux, which constructed solutions that made the UI 1,000 times better. And now every company uses Linux. You're using it right now, even if you don't realize it. One of the devices on your desktop is Linux based, at least, if not all of them. And so so I think the same thing will happen. Like, people will start making a bunch of tools to make access to, it's hard for me to, Dan here on the call, he buys all my crypto for me. It's hard for me to figure out like wallets and exchanges.
And we just buy what Omid tells us to buy.
Exactly. So it's hard to figure out like all the complexity on these things because the UI is so awful. But I kind of assume things will get better. And the final thing I want to state is a network is, there's Metcalfe's law, where a network is the value of a network is an exponential factor on top of the number of users. So the more users of crypto there are, the more valuable crypto is and the more likely it is to stay. But in a period like this, where the number of people fleeing crypto just because of out of fear right now is declining, that also makes the decline in value exponential. Could that death spiral down?
It could. And for specific projects and protocols, that could very well mean the end of them. I would guess like Bitcoin and Ethereum have passed the point where they're at that level of existential risk.
Yeah.
But actually, can I ask you a question, James, since you have a computer science background and you brought up Linux? Do I understand correctly that most of the internet's core infrastructure runs on Unix or Linux?
Absolutely.
And that's free open source software that anybody can use, nobody owns, and is managed by a nonprofit foundation. Is that right?
That's correct for Linux. Yeah.
Okay. So why doesn't the internet just run on Microsoft or Google instead?
All right. That's a good point. I guess because, well, first off, the internet was not popular until Tim Berners-Lee made the first web browser and web server, and that was built on top of Unix and Linux. So that could answer your question right there. But even so, at the same time, there was already AOL and CompuServe providing kind of online services, and those never had as big acceptance as the web. I would argue, though, the web and the web browser wasn't even necessarily, the original web browser wasn't necessarily a better interface than AOL's interface. So yeah, you make a point that perhaps people wanted something that was more democratic, more populist. And so the thing is, economic policy is democratic in a crypto environment, in a Bitcoin environment, as opposed to economic policy of the U.S. now. 99.999% of us have no say in economic policy, whereas in a Bitcoin environment, either everyone does or nobody does.
Yeah, and even simpler than that. The reason why I was asking that question is like, I think of everything from a resilience point of view. And if a third of the internet ran on some closed source Microsoft software, then the internet wouldn't be resilient for a couple of reasons. One, at any point in time, Microsoft could say, hey, this is really popular. We're going to start charging for it. It was free up until now, but it's going to be like however they would charge for it. Two, because it's closed source, only people at Microsoft know how it works, which means that if there are certain flaws in it, you don't have necessarily the best and brightest looking out for it, which means that someday something catastrophic could happen. This goes back to the point about like, why do you want core infrastructure like Ethereum? It's totally transparent and it's totally open source and nobody owns it. So one, you have like a million people looking at it, right? You have all the world's best and brightest can go in there and opine on like, oh, I think the software, the code, the algorithm, whatever is vulnerable. And this happens. And then it gets patched up. And then the other thing is like Ethereum itself is not one day going to be like, oh, you guys really like what we're doing with NFT, so we're going to charge $1,000 per transaction. Because it's decentralized, these existential threats are significantly diminished.
Yeah, that's a good point, because let's just take the Google example. When Google's algorithm changes, it significantly hurts thousands or even millions of businesses while benefiting thousands of millions of others. And it's unpredictable and it's not transparent. So there's no way to prepare for it.